She's a pragmatic leader and assistant labor officer with over 3 decades in labor administration across all professional departments that believe so much in compliance, high performance, and dynamism. Mrs. Badejo is a graduate of the University of Ibadan, where she has a first-class degree in guidance and counseling, an MSc in University of Lagos, Industrial and Labor Relations, and a PhD in Career Guidance, Integration and Career Guidance. ILO certified licensed business coach and a financial educator, social and community dialogue expert, behavioral change and communication expert as well. She's certified collective bargaining expert and has a diploma in social standards by UNILAG and World Bank. She's passionate about nature, strategy development, innovation, community and humanitarian project capacity with children and geriatric works. She's currently the zonal director of the Federal Ministry of Labor and Employment, Southwest Zone. Please, can you give a round of applause to Ms. Badejo as she comes up here? Very much. You're welcome. Thank you very much, everyone. And at this point, I would like to hand over to our moderator, Mr. Jami Akolade. Please pardon me. I have to bring on Mr. Epa, the Secretary General for the Nigerian Labour Congress. This place we won't be having this conversation without him being here. So while they're getting the chair for him, so can we have Mr. Epa, can we have you join us up here? Please, can we give me a round of applause, please?
Papa, I think the orange head.
Orange head of what?
The orange head that used to be his.
Good afternoon, everyone. President, Mr. Kutiesi and others in the room, our esteemed guests, speakers, thank you very much for honoring our own session. The question of the national minimum wage, even now, is one that is still raging. We know that for the better part of the first half of the year, there was a lot of back and forth, to put it mildly, between the stakeholders in the labor sector, with organized labor, the federal government, and the organized private sector negotiate what should be the appropriate minimum wage for Nigerian workers. That conversation implementation phase of the new minimum wage is what we're entering into now. We thought this would be a topical issue for this conference. And we have persons who are very suited to discussing this topic. We're going to be looking at the various factors and issues surrounding the fixing of the national minimum wage. what brought about minimum wage legislation, both from an historical point of view and legislative point of view. How is it fixed? What is the mechanism for fixing minimum wage? What are the factors that we consider or that are considered fixing minimum wage? And what are the issues surrounding its implementation? Why is it so difficult to get states, for instance, to pay the minimum wage, even when it is fixed? We know that the last minimum wage was 30,000. By the time we entered the new regime, about 50 states were yet to implement it. So our able speakers will be looking at these issues, and we're going to have two papers presented this afternoon, and then we'll break into a short panel. Well, very well introduced before. Just to say that it's a very simple, it's a Falabi Kuti essay. There are about development.
I think it unfolds with what I'm just introducing the topic of perspective of reform, perspective before the panelists get an opportunity to do justice to the debate details. So I put together a small paper and started by my MBA, giving us the opportunity to interrogate this topic at a very auspicious time, wages. I said that the topic itself, ensuring adequacy of wages, minimum mission impossible, it's it poses an impenetrable question that it is not one that you can readily draw an answer to. So from that, I've gone on to conceptual, what I call conceptual clarifications, that the dictionary defines wage as payment usually of money for labor or services, people that are called into contract on daily or work basis. The Nigerian Labor Act, Section 19, Section 20, to attempt what I call a very exhaustive definition when it says the wage is remuneration or anything, however designated or calculated, capital being expressed in terms of money and fixed by mutual agreement or by law, which are paid by virtue of the contract that is required to the worker for work done for service rendered. On a broader level, International Labour Organization sees wage or wages from the perspective of a minimum sum payable to a worker. These are the competing needs of that worker and his family and socio-economic considerations. And to that extent, the application says that the minimum wage will be understood to be the minimum sum payable to a worker for work performed or service rendered with a given period, whether calculated on the basis of time, output, which may not be reduced either by the law or collective, which is guaranteed by law and which may be used, which may be in such a way as to cover the minimum needs of the worker and what's called the that is it says standard of living. And I'm going to say that to that extent, there's a difference between living wages and minimum wage. Minimum wages are minimum amount of remuneration. Employer is required to pay wage earners for the period during the given period. On the other hand, ILO says that a living wage is the level of pay that gives workers and their families a decent standard of living. This includes being able to afford these things, such as food, housing, healthcare, education, transport, and clothing. ILO has actually gone on to worryingly stated that what we call minimum wage has not been adjusted for decades and remained below the poverty line in well over 70 countries. Of course, you know the bulk of that in the African countries.
Marriage now because not only men the benefits now. And I don't know what is marriage, why for people for now. Because it's all about childbirth now.
Conditions of labor include provision and adequate living. So as long as 1990, ILO has seen it is perspective what is a living wage. And in 1990, I've gone further to itemize the new conventions specifically, more pointed the minimum wage fixing convention 1971, convention number 131, which is considered to offer broader the protection than the initial convention of 1990. And taking all of that into account, being able to trace this, that as of 2015, that convention has been ratified by 52 member nations, including countries since 2000. A little set on the ILO side, on the countries that are ratified, Nigeria is conspicuous in countries that are ratified now. Making it home, the earliest attempt at a national minimum wage in Nigeria has been well documented in the together by Monfao in Historical Review of Nigeria, where he noted that the first minimum wage law was signed into law by late Shagari in 1981. And that law was prompted by the advocacy of the the 1981 covered all different workers except seasonal workers, those who work in enterprises employing fewer than 15 workers. The wage was 425 naira per month. Using the exchange rate of US $1 to 0.61 naira in 1981. This wage stood today at US $204. The country sees minimum wage at least a total of 4 times after the initial establishment in 1994. 2001 increased during that. And such as the way it's benchmarked in previous years was to review after every 5 years. So the law has always stated that it should be reviewed after 5 years. 1981 suffered went beyond well over 8 before there was an initial review. Now the good thing about what the administration that President Tinubu has proposed now is that this subject to the lawmakers asked this will be done every 3 years. Now, in the paper, I've actually gone on to itemize a number of legislation related with making statements, categorical statements on wages. And I said on the positive note, the Labour Act, only the first 6, 7 chapters talking about wages. Gone on also to itemize a few provisions of Labour Act on express prohibition and the allowances in relation to what an employer can do in wages of the employee. The National Minimum Wage Act in 2019 the bill was signed into law, making it compulsory for all employers of labor in Nigeria to pay their workers the sum of 30,000. This act amended the National Minimum Wage Act of 2004 to provide for a revised national minimum wage and also to provide for a realistic penalty regime. Now, 2019 was the first time that there was a realistic penalty regime for those who violate, employers who fail to keep to the provision of the Act. And the Act, like its predecessor, applies to employers with 25 or more employees, and is applicable across all sectors, with a few exceptions, which were workers operating in part-time contract provision employees, seasonal industries like agriculture, and employees of the vessel or aircraft, and laws that regulate merchant shipping on civil aviation and flight. A tripartite committee, which comprises members of the government, labor, and the private sector, to review the national minimum wage was established under the Act. And then in 2004, amendment modified the same, the previous Act of 2019, introducing two major significant changes. There's a wage increase from 30,000 to 70,000. The review period has been reduced from 5 years to 3 years. Judicial intervention on enforcement and compliance with the minimum wage law. I've noted that from my limited research, there is a depth of decisions in this area. The industrial court said that this is a fundamental right action in corporate trustees of laws and rights awareness initiative versus federal government of Nigeria. All reported suit number NICN APJ 292-2019, judgment delivered on 21st May 2020 by Honorable Justice Anuwe. The claimant sought a pronouncement, which I heard that so was a fundamental right action by which the NGO had gone to court and assumed the federal government to court that the failure to ensure the payment of the federal minimum wage of 30,000 as prescribed in the Minimum Wage Act of 2019 amounted to forced labor of the employees, and a violation of their right to work. The court found that there was no concrete or convincing evidence to establish respondent pays less than the minimum wage to the workers, and noted that a defective case was actually put before the court. The court had gone on to note that, and I quote in part, the applicant have that saying that responding as paying less than 30,000 stipulated as a minimum wage. This allegation is not supported by any objective. So what amount of salary is paid to workers? Let me mention that the applicant or the deponent is not one of the workers who are allegedly affected by the register. None of the affected workers are opposed to any agreement containing facts and figures as to what amount not to be paid as minimum wage and what amount was paid. This is also there is also no document attached to the application explaining workers' salary on the basis of minimum wage of workers and what was being paid to them. The applicant has not shown the salaries being paid to workers, which happen to be less than the minimum wage. The applicant has failed to give concrete or evidence to establish this allegation that respondent pays less than, so from the one group, I've been claiming there was an attempt by this NGO to get the federal government to keep to the statement of the law in complying with national minimum wage, but the action that was put before the court was clearly defective and could not establish what was sought before the court. I've moved on to identify what I call adequacy of minimum legal wages, and then stated that to initiate the focus already being above. As far as 1919, ILO advocated for the provision of an adequate wage. Provision of an adequate wage. And according to a UN report, as of 2020, over 1 billion working people worldwide earn wages that are inadequate for existence. The importance of adequate wages is enshrined in Article 23 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted by the UN in 1948, which states everyone who works has the right to a just and favorable remuneration, ensuring for himself and his family an existence worthy of human dignity and supplemented, if necessary, by other means of social protection. It is widely reported that more than 170 countries have set the minimum wage, with the almost fall short of poverty. Instead of a minimum wage, there are growing calls for governments and businesses to support a minimum wage that more realistically covers people's needs. Well, there is no universally agreed amount. The living wage reflects, while there is no universally agreed amount, the living wage reflects the true cost of living and cover the needs of workers and their families. And again, to make narrative home, just yesterday, an online news channel, in the sharing one, jubilation of Adamawa civil servant receiving 70,000 minimum wage. And it was actually in the news yesterday that civil servants in Adamawa rejoiced that Friday last, and the bill to 7,000, making Adamawa the first and the only state that's implemented 7,000 in more ways. That's, I mean, what the first part of this item, which I thought to bring out is civil servants were flogged. And some of the civil servants, most of them receiving their salary since Friday, just Friday last week, promised to put in their best as their financial burden have been reduced. And a particular case was cited. Alhaji Danjuman Yusuf Muhammad, a driver at the government house, promised to enroll his children back to school, having been withdrawn due to financial constraints.
a very interesting paper which I've had the privilege of reading in advance. What I'll just plead with you, sir, is because of the time factor and the technical issues we have, if you could please compress that paper within the 10 minutes, because many of those issues, yes, we'll be interrogating many of those issues during the panel discussion. But I've read the paper, I know it's explosive and will require a lot of time, but please. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Director. My warm compliments to the President of the National Industrial Nigeria. Since I only have 10 minutes, let me go straight to the point. Well, the national minimum wage cycle is a 5-yearly cycle, or was a 5-yearly cycle. The notice was given to the government last year, and negotiations should start immediately. Government accepted. In fact, in the MOU signed with government on the 2nd of October 2023, one of the items government accepted to set up the process for negotiation, the next one, which was November. Government, however, observed that which, in fact, the process was not started until this year, sometime early this year, and it was a fits and starts. So it was not surprising that in the course of celebrating the May, 1st of May, notice was given to the government that if by the end of May, an acceptable minimum wage was not on the table, there will be trouble. So, on the 10th of June, an national action commenced in conjunction with GUC. And the time was right because, one, there was the issue of tariff hike, 250%, as insane as that. So, in the course of the action, the offices of AEDs, offices of distribution through companies, TCN, and the Ministry of Power were shut. That was the same signal to the government. In spite of that, when government saw the sign and wanted an honest conversation, perhaps I should have taken you back to the issue of the 650,000 people. Offer 650,000 and broke it down. ABC. Government made an offer, a counter offer for 3,000. Needle that up to 54, 57, the way you price Maggi in the market. And stopped at 60,000. We came down drastically from 615,000 to 250,000. So we both stopped at that. It was the inability of the government, but the refusal of the government to move up that led to that major warning protest action. Well, in making our offer, as I said earlier, we brought this offer down, housing 40,000. Where do you get the house of 40,000 in this? Education, 40,000. Toiletries, issues led to that 20,000. In fact, we used the barest possible rates for a family of 6. A husband, a wife, and 4 children. So what it is. Government felt, in fact, it knew it had no justification for this counter offer on 8,000. It wouldn't even bring it down. It justified our offer. We looked at the issue of the removal of fuel subsidy in 2023, 29th of May 2023, when the president, on the day of his inauguration, the day he was supposed to put a smile on the faces of Nigerians, in furtherance of the mantra of renewed hope, he put sadness in their hearts, said subsidy is gone. When subsidy was still running the 2023 Appropriation Act, I know the rules. By virtue of what he did, he had committed a major offense. But the president has no right to unilaterally violate the Appropriation Act without resort to the National Assembly. So the removal of fuel subsidy costs an upsurge by as much as 500% across the board. Cost of housing, cost of education, cost of health, all of that. The second justification for our demand for 715,000 was that in the name of floating the naira and collapsing the multiple exchange rates in their own words, in order to eliminate fraud and corruption and readily make available foreign exchange to manufacturers whose concerns my friend here superintends. Government massively devalued the naira. Initially, manufacturers clapped, but they didn't see the naira. They didn't see the foreign exchange. In fact, their woes piled up because the naira now had moved from 350 naira to 1,900 naira to dollar. This created problems at the level of the country. Our national debt moved overnight from 72 trillion to 81 trillion, and it's still climbing. In the first quarter this year, we used 1.3 trillion to service our debt. So the third issue related to the first one, inflation moved from 23.2% to 33.7% and 34.1%. For those of you who are on basic medication, let me use that one. The medication we are buying for 1,000 naira pay from 10,000. Then the fourth reason, government at the instance of Bretton Woods institutions moved energy rates, moved the one they call man A as high as 250%. Now everybody knows that high energy rates are not good for business. I'm running up. They are not good for business. And government, the Bretton Woods institutions that ask government to do this, they will not do this in the Western capitals. Fourth, or fifth or fourth now, is or was the case of taxes. To have a multiplicity of taxes, making the environment highly toxic, creating a situation of debt and dying, leading to 40% of big businesses going under within this period. 60% of the continuous business crashing, and backed by an exodus of companies, listing, and all of that. So the situation became very difficult for the country Nigeria. And this was happening at the time government's revenue had moved from what was declared at the fact, had moved from 700 billion a month to 1.2 trillion and climbing. So had a situation where the government became extremely very rich and then has citizens that were extremely poor. Okay, so we say no, there must be a network. Government is so rich, its citizens, its workforce are great, wealth and services must have their wages increased. So there was whatever small there were enough resources. And I tell you, payment of minimum wage is not dependent on surplus resources. It depends on the value attached to your workforce. It depends on the political will. It depends on the realization that our economies, at whatever level we look at it, are driven by the capacity of these workers. And I want to cite another example. In 2009, America was on recession. What did he do? He gave money to big businesses, other businesses, and raised the wages of workers and ran the economy. The economy was in a bullish for 8 years, 4 years from Trump. So why wouldn't our government do this? Instead, government went on shopping every day. These executives outside for investors without taking care of the companies here in the country. Government is living, listening. So our demand, our belief, the summit was by time is up, is that a minimum wage, the national minimum wage is fair, is doable. The capacity of it, the sufficiency of it, if we are honest with ourselves, it is also doable. And it is important that that we realize that the most important component of wealth creation is the human person. And the greatest asset of any nation are its citizens. I rest my case. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Comrade. I know we rushed a lot, but that's because many of the issues that I've noticed raised in the paper to do our best to go through them during the panel discussions. And a lot of issues have been raised. Due to time constraint, we'll try to restrict discussion within 20 minutes and see how far we can go so that we can also give the members of the audience time to ask questions. I'm not sure if my Lord Justice Naif wants to make any preliminary point at this point. Okay, so we'll refer that later. So we'll just go straight to the panel discussions and allow me to also take my seat while I do this. So I'll start with Mrs. Badijo. As the government representative, so to speak, I'm sure you got a little bit comfortable hearing Comrade Eba speak, but these issues keep coming up. Both papers mention the factors that are used in fixing minimum wage. Basically, you look at the cost of living and all of that, inflation rate and all, in fixing the minimum wage. So the question is, if the stakeholders know this basic premise of what we should be looking at in fixing minimum wage, why is Comrade Eba asking for 615,000 and the government starts its counter offer with 48,000? Does it mean you are both using different parameters, or the inflation rate available to neighbor is different from the government? So are you able to shed light on this? Why do we have the disparity in the understanding of what the indices are? And how do you think we can have a more objective framework for fixing this rate so that we don't go through this long route that we're going to share with this last?
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. So good afternoon again, everyone. Thank you for corporate knows that they set template for the fixing of minimum wage. It's really applying the tripartite representing everyone. But as Ministry of Labor, it's more important to understand the difference between actual implementation, being that we are in direct we just directly with the employers and the employees and the business owners. We understand the realities of the and we have this responsibility to try and keep everybody in employment situations where employers come and say, you know what, don't, we can't afford this. And a lot of times, you know, when there's unemployment, there's a tendency for a typical business owner to maximize his profits, which also include, you know, finding the best ways. I say more often than not, employees become the victim. So you see a situation where employees will tell you, oh, it's fine. I remember when the minimum wage was zero, and someone was saying, oh, 50,000 is okay, because they think somewhere along the line they should be able to manage the 30,000, and then there are some states that never even got to pay the 30,000 because the states, their governors could not afford this amount. So by and large, 610,000 naira. If you look at it in real time, imagine how many people on the average earn 250,000 naira in a month. We're not saying the government is right to put taking tax. I'm also affected. I don't get paid enough, right? You know, and we understand how important it is for people to get right wages. It also aids competition and productivity, you know, bring up the economy and also I think ultimately if we have to go with the reality, we know what's at stake, we know what should be done, but from the angle of the Ministry of Labor, it still boils down to creating avenues, finding innovative ways of managing wage issues, the way that we make both the employees and the employers and the business make it tenable for them to work the path together to finding that balance, you know, because we all know the 600,000. And we could do that by, you know, the world of work has also changed. You know, the world of work has changed. It's not, work is no longer space to be in your house. So, what is the percentage of people that are even actually covered by the minimum wage? I think it's 6.3% that actually the structure system that the minimum wage will affect. So what happens is 3%. So it's in the discussion and the conversation.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to return to that point on the category of workers that are excluded, so to speak, from the minimum wage. So I'll move to Mr. Oyerike. So, sorry. So, I mean, we keep talking about the minimum wage never being enough. In fact, the latest in this paper. His conclusion was that it's an impossible task to pay adequate minimum wage. And some analysts have said, look, we have to go through this again. In 3 years' time, we'll have to negotiate another. We have another 8 months or 1 year to negotiate. So just as the legislature have suggested, so it suggested an annual review. Some have said, why don't we build that mechanism into the act itself? So we have an escalation clause in the act, say something like every year the minimum wage increases by, let's say, 5%, or shall increase by a percentage equivalent to the prevailing inflation rate at that time, something of that nature. From your perspective as an employer representative, do you think such an idea, there's a merit in it, or do you see any drawbacks from taking that position? So that by next year or in 2 years' time, everyone knows automatically what should expect as a minimum wage.
Thank you very much. I'll rest on the next protocol. and also acknowledge the presence of the Lord, which is kind. And thank you for the many things you do for this community. I think for me, it's better yet, and there is this fundamental error, either process error or application error. And colleagues, even in labor, consistently, whether deliberately or oversight, government also. And I think the foundation for this crisis, this wage crisis, started with the negotiation of the wage award. You are negotiating a wage award or agreeing on the wage award without factoring the third leg of the tripartite. And you agree on some agreements on MOU or MOA with government that that standard will pay. And it was signed, and the expectation was that the private sector will hook, line, and sinker by it. So those were the first issues. And that conversation was brought to the minimum wage committee because Labour felt we have 30,000 as award. The current minimum wage is 30,000. So anything below 60,000 is a wage reduction. But for us, private sector, it doesn't add up because that conversation was a bipartite agreement, which is valid within the context of the realities of those matters. So there have been contextual issues, even when the president made this comment, the operation of the national wage, comments about living wage, and what we were supposed to negotiate tripartite is a minimum wage. Also at the ILO group, also my friend, collaborate make allusion to the ILO conventions, consistent mentioning of living wage. Even as at today, as at March, there was no universally agreed of living wage. And I know the committee of experts on wages had a conversation in February, and they submitted their recommendation on context and content of the living wage to the ILO governing body in March. And the governing body adopted that report. That look, now we can start conversing of what the living is. So for us, fundamentally, conversion remains the minimum wage. And that is adequacy of minimum. It's also neither here. It's a subjective. Adequate is subjective. And you cannot take out the context of adequacy overarching framework. The foundation of this. And we had said when the committee was inaugurated in February, we felt in January 13, we felt it's not a good time to negotiate because all the variables are going south. So he mentioned inflation rates. So Salami also mentioned probably the most important factor to use is inflation rate. But you're not talking about interest rates. Interest rate is also going up. So if I borrowed 1,000 naira from the bank today at 5%, if tomorrow the interest rate becomes 20%, I'm in trouble as a business. So how do you balance that out? I borrowed $1 million when the exchange rate was 400 naira, and without no fault of mine, the exchange rate became 1,600 naira. And you are asking me, you think those are not factors I should consider? Why you are asking me to pay? You know, the private sector, you don't draw subvention. You don't have sovereign opportunity to borrow big government capital. The government can even print ways and means. You can do all, but the private sector doesn't have that muscle. For us, it's a context we must look at holistic. If we say we should impute mechanism to adjust minimum wage in view of inflation. So will our colleague also accept that if the reverse is happening and inflation rate is coming down, will the mechanism also progressively reduce wage to be in reality context? We must have this conversation holistically in the field. But if not, we'll stand our ground, stay on our high ground. But for us, the private sector, I think the most fundamental issue We need to fix the economy. It's not about their needs. It's what the value can buy. If tomorrow, if labor has succeeded in getting 650,000 and inflation rate continues to go up, cost of living cost, because the business will pass back to school. So the 650 you get might just buy you what that 1,000 used to buy you. So we bring everybody back to ground zero. So for us, we have spoken to government, we have got government. Let's see the foundation of the and in the context of their parameters, mention the needs of workers and their family, which is also a dangerous context. The economic situation of the country, enterprise sustainability, and we can't rule out affordability. You know, to surprise you, the 2 months or 3 months we spend at National Minimum Committee level, one conversation that everybody either deliberately or inadvertently escaped or we didn't go to was the context of productivity, which we believe should be the focus, the conversation that should drive wages. Productivity should be a factor that should drive wages. And lastly, for me on this context, we are also making a fundamental contextual mistake about the minimum wage. I'm not sure the minimum wage is meant to buy somebody a bag of rice. I'm not sure the minimum wage, I'm not sure, even in US, America, in Europe, hardly will you find anybody doing minimum wage work, doing one job. It hardly exists. And I did a quick when you are introducing, I did a quick calculation, 30,000, 40 hours work week, 160 hours per month, divided by 30,000, it gives you 188 naira per hour. So we need to bring all those parameters into the box and let the context of the current economic situation solve the issue. If not, creates a lot of problems. And I remember I mentioned that flow of national minimum wage. Now we agree a figure here and will have created problems for the national industrial base. Because at the point of enforcement, and employers cannot pay, then you have many employees going to court at the same time. And by the time the cases will be dispensed with, we'll be back again for the negotiation of another minimum wage. Meanwhile, the other ones want that improve. So it's something that it's a reform we are pushing. And let's agree on what exactly works. Not best practice, even if my love might not agree, but best fit. What can work for us for this context.
Thank you very much. So from my neighbor, so you should take in your seat as it's interesting that I think everyone agrees that the answers might not be simple. Mr. Yerige has touched on a number of points which I would like you to elaborate on. One I will focus on for now is the issue of productivity. Now, the way I understand that argument is this: the wage that labor expects an employer to pay is coming from production by that employer, whether it's manufacturing goods or it's providing services. It is the output of the worker that generates the capital that is used to then pay the workers. And some have said, when you compare the wage in Nigeria with wage in the US, for instance, are you not comparing apples and oranges? Because a highly productive economy with one that is less than productive. And that gauntlet has been thrown to labor. Why not improve or boost the productivity of the workers? And if they are more productive, civil service is more productive, it is efficient, it is highly professional, definitely wages will rise. User of their services is able to get more from their efforts and will not be talking about minimum wage, because we have countries that in fact do not even have the minimum wage fixed. But by the mere nature of the fact that the economy is very productive, workers themselves can naturally attract higher wages. What would you say to that?
very much for your question. But before I respond to the question, I'd like to advise Mr. Ayeni's attention to Article 3 of the International Labour Organization Minimum Wage Fixing Convention, 1970, number 131. Special reference to developing countries. And I quote, the elements to be taken into consideration in determining the level of minimum wages shall so far as possible and appropriate in relation to national practice and conditions include pay, the needs of workers and families, taking into account the general level of wages in the country, the cost of living, social security, living standards of other social groups. B, economic factors, including the requirements of economic development, levels of productivity, and the desirability of attaining and maintaining high level of employment. I rest my case. To your question. Productivity. First of all, even when we asked for 615,000, it did not in any way compare with the minimum wage of the United States or the United Kingdom. Going by the extant exchange rate, the minimum wages in these countries are not less than 3 million a month. 3 million when you add up. So, and we were asking for about 1/5 or 1/4 of that. Take notice of this. The citizens of this country are now compelled to pay international rates. The cost of PMS in Nigeria is higher than the cost of PMS in the US at the moment. The cost unit of the life that you pay for is higher. So if we are paying international rates, it's only fair that we receive international wages.
Yes.
This I tell you this. I mean, the money from the extreme right-wing market policies are traceable to the Bretton Woods institutions in Washington. That is where they're coming from. Quite often times they are imposed on your leaders, your president. You remember the week the World Bank said that is tariff. That was the very week the Minister of Power and gave the go ahead to take. That those tariffs were segregated. It's not true. You all pay a band A rate. Because those from band A are predominantly for companies, and they transfer to you that cost in the products and services that they ship. It is when your neighbor now to patronize them. I'm off the warehouses. That is when they begin to pay. I mean, someone will say this that since we are paying international rates, it's only fair that we also get the same class of international wages. On the issue of productivity, I want to understand one thing. Even in the United States, the concept, the logic, and philosophy of public service is distinct from that of the private sector. If you want to know whether the Nigerian is productive, go to a production line. Just stay and watch. Your brothers and sisters become machines. Go to a construction site. Go to a Julius Berger site. For you to take your guy to Kuli, come back to the same because that project must be completed at a specific time. Each segment of the production of the construction is calculated to the last hour So whoever tells you that Nigeria is not productive is joking. We are more than productive. And the issue of whether minimum wage should buy a bag of rice, the session of people. And Mr. We have the conscious of the fact that when there is a capacity deficit, it directly affects his energy. And let me share with you a story. I was part of the team that met a governor. In fact, was a governor, they say he was not going to pay. Everybody spoke, and they said, well, he was not going to pay. Whatever I wanted to do, go ahead and do. And it was a dead end. At that point, I got up. And I said, first, we need you as a teacher. Second, we need you as a businessman. Third, as a politician. And you become governor. For your first name, you are now 2 years into the second term. And you think you no longer need these people. So you can now say anything you want to say. And let me tell you a story. In 1979, when General Obasanjo was doing his farewell talk, which Christine thank you talk, a journalist asked him a question. He said, in the event this country will need your services, before the person will finish, General Obasanjo said, in my place, after saying good night, don't come back to say good evening. 20 years after 1999, when Obasanjo became president, he didn't want to go. So, do you know what will happen to me with service? Do you know what will happen to me? At that point, he wanted to say, go for dinner. And I was saying, and immediately, his tenure ended. He's occupying a strategic position. Okay? So these are the issues. And I remember telling him, I said, there is a nice, I said, of all the things around, lost the most peaceful. You know the reason why? Because of the relative prosperity in your state. And the other states around you in a trouble. Lost the relative prosperity. So he got the message. So for the organized private sector that we have been agonizing, on whose behalf we've been agonizing, the worker needs to be empowered. Because for every single worker, even the least paid worker, has a family. Okay? Our traditional family system takes the place of the social protection system that we have in the advanced economies. So the moment you keep in poverty, that poverty will come to haunt you. You remember, for those of you who are old enough in this gathering, you remember this case when Christmas was coming. Go to US, go to the shopping whatever business. You saw and felt the electricity. Yes. Okay. So in as it is, even though typically of every environment, we have domesticated the meanings of minimum wage and living wage. We are also equally at liberty to adopt which one suits our care at any given time. But for me, lastly, that we have the national capacity to pay. We have the subnational capacity to pay. And the first signal you should get is that Adama has paid. Adama is not the first category in the states. In fact, our example, what we meant in the course of minimum wage was that the states, the least resources were the ones paying. But imagine they say like Bayelsa, the point saying they have enough money to pay. Why are they paying the Bayelsa? They don't need any resource. It's not the Bumungo say whatever. So you see, a lot of this depends on the will and the value attached to your workforce. But in any case, as those states that didn't pay, most states that operated in breach of law, the economies did not perform as great as the economies of those that were paid.
Thank you.
It's a simple thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, so I see that your message resonated. If we have more time, we'll still talk about the implementation. But let me move to Mrs. Manager. And there was a point you made earlier regarding, let's call it the cover of the Minimum Wage Act. I think that's something that many people don't know, at least people who are not in the labor sector. So when the act fixes a minimum wage and then says, oh, this does not apply to people who are employed part-time, people who are working in a place that they have less than 25 members, people who work on a piece rate basis or commission basis. That basically tells you that the informal sector is not covered. Yet, any publication or by any parameter you look at, the informal sector takes about over 70% of the workforce in any society, especially in Africa. So the question is, if you are given something with the right hand and then taking it with the left, that vast majority of people in the informal sector, your house girls, house helps, the domestic workers, the artisans, and all of that, the law is basically saying you can pay them whatever you like. That's what it means. So the question is, what is the government doing to safeguard the interests of that category of workers? Because they too are the head, according to what we like to see in literature. Is anyone looking their way at all? I think is the question. Why we focus on corporate workers, people who have people like 55 of them. How do you take care of those people that are not covered by that?
Yes, thank you. This particular question is very important to me personally, aside the government, because you have to be a labor officer on the field to actually feel the pulse of employees and employers vis-a-vis the current world of work. And it's, I think, more important for us to do something about the economy and then getting the acts that meet our reality. You understand best global practices, but there's reality. Sometimes in trying to protect people, they look at you like, I don't have anything. I will take it. It's an instinctive survival. It's a survival instinct that you have absolute control over. It's like, look, if you are negotiating this for me, I'm comfortable just getting even half of it. So sometimes you have an abeyance, your government, you are saying, oh, this is what the law says. This is how the process should be. But that's not their reality. So our conversations have to include every critical person, not just, the tripartite, but it's expanded. Because work has changed. Work has changed. 85% of the skill sets are gone. 63% of the populace are in the informal sector. They are not structured. And then we have traditional gaps where the Gen Z don't want to have anything. They don't even want to help our government. So we even have to get past there first, because we form the larger majority of the workforce that is one unemployed. So they have new skills that we have not even factored in discussing issues of the wage. So we are still tinkering with digitalization. We are trying to get government to meet up with reality on how to serve the public in a way that will get them to trust and have a conversation. Are we having that conversation? Have we gone to say, okay, government, workers, representatives, employers, what are the private business owners, the startups? You won't believe the kind of skill sets that exist that we're not even thinking about. There are laws that are earning a lot more than 70,000. So they're just looking at us and laughing at what are these ones talking about? Like people make $1 million in a day, they make 3 million in a month. young people, businesses that we don't even know. We haven't even captured them in the tax net. We don't know them. We are not having that conversation. So you're talking about minimum wage, how many people are here? Or if you go online, if you go on TV, everybody's talking about how hard it is. I would expect people to be really interested about hearing the mindset, where are you? For government, for field workers, it's one thing to be government is like the Federal Ministry of Labor. But for field workers, we are not even meeting our responsibilities in getting to know, to give them the kind of information and education that they need. Most workers don't have labor education. They don't know what is happening. They just know they don't understand the fundamentals of how to protect themselves. They just know I am working. I haven't worked for X number of years. So if somebody gives me 50,000 naira, I'm good to go. And then when we talk about flexibility of work, we know the position of our Labor Act. They need to be amended. It's still ongoing. So that is a peculiar situation on its own. For us, even being government, I would say we need to just come down to the basics, identify the people we are having conversation with, understand what employment generation and wealth creation means in real time, and then begin to work a solution to it. But as it stands, we are having a conversation about 6.3% of the workforce and 63% aren't represented. So who are we discussing the minimum wage? So I think the minimum wage conversation, like everything else globally, is an evolving discussion. Whatever we decide or we think we know now, change next month. So it's a conversation that I'm not sure we can finish. It just needs to be factored.
Thank you very much. And that's an interesting statistic, because when you look at all the effort put into negotiating minimum wage, and it turns out that it's only for 60-something% of the entire workforce, it makes you even look at the value you're getting from that conversation. So I think we'll have to pause it here and then see if we can take okay, a quick one before we take questions from them.
Because after now, with the next conference is next year, and the conversion of people which I don't come. And since it's the MBA conference, as much as I try not to go legalistic ways, with comrades, because he read succinctly from